So, most people are naturally curious. And in this day and age, we can fill our curiosity really quick or easily. We wonder why things are the way they are, and we investigate them. Whether that's exploring the great cosmos or simply checking the Internet Movie Database to see where we've seen that actor before. Or, one of my favorite things, seeing how many degrees I am from Kevin Bacon. I'm 3. I worked with Lily Tomlin, who was in Shadows and Fog, who worked with John Malkovich, who was in Queen's Logic with Kevin Bacon. Some of us are naturally curious. Some of the most naturally curious are our kids. The ones who just told me they don't know how to tell a baker from a policeman, basically. But they have some awesome questions sometimes, such as, I saw one where a kid was looking in the oven and says, "Mommy, are the cookies loading?" While they're ready for the cookies to come out. Or, if plants need rain and sun to grow, and rainbows are made of light and water, are rainbows plant food? Or there's another one. Why are you buying beer, Dad? Do you know how much candy that money could buy? And of course, there's the satirized questions. The, but why? But why? But why? But why? In today's gospel, Jesus is walking through Solomon's porch during the Festival of Lights, or Hanukkah. Now, this is still a fairly new celebration. It's only about 100 years. So it's still important and it's fresh in some people's memories. The stories are still just being told and retold. This is a place of importance. It was the porch or the portico on the east side of the temple. And that's where it was called the Porch of Judgment, where the king would sit in judgment and exercise justice for those who were brought before him. And here is Jesus strolling through this historic location, physically embodying justice in this place of justice. Something his life and teaching were all about. And into this setting, into this moment, comes the identity question. Hey, Jesus, stop keeping us in the dark. If you're the Messiah, just tell us outright. Tell us already. Are you the Messiah? My belief is that Jesus is getting pretty tired of these questions, actually. This need to question Jesus' identity is something called the Messianic secret for John. John has used the term Messiah 2 times to explain to the non-Jews who Jesus is. It is the equivalent to the term Christos, or the Anointed One. But the questioners still don't get it. One has to give Jesus his due here. I mean, how many times must he answer this question, especially for John's special people, quote, the Jews? Now, remembering John's gospel, the Jews are sometimes the Pharisees. Elsewhere, the Jews may stand for the priestly classes. All this suggests the Jews refers to principally, though not exclusively, to members of the establishment, the leadership, the hierarchy, the power-wielding class. It's well established in the tradition of the gospel that the Pharisees were Jesus' principal sparring partners during his ministry, and that the priests were instrumental in his death. So Jesus is being asked once again, prove to us who exactly you are. Jesus has over and over again given people around him proof of who he is. He has performed miracles. He has taught wisely. He has accompanied the most vulnerable of society, and yet he is still questioned. Quote, he has had others question his identity repeatedly. This was normal at the time. Folks who taught or prophesied were often asked to give proof of their deeds and the power behind their gifts. But the questions in this passage go beyond that. They are questioning not only his identity, but his power is verifiably from God. And as I hear that doubt creep into their questions, I am reminded that doubt is a constant companion to faith. And there it is, the hard truth. as human beings, not only are we naturally curious, we naturally doubt. Many in our faith communities experience doubt. They doubt their abilities to overcome difficult situations. They doubt if they will make it through without succumbing to an old addiction. They doubt their friends or parents are aware of how much pain they are in. And they doubt God's presence in their lives and their connections to God. Others may see a need they could meet, but doubt their own capabilities in the light of a faith setting. This is where one may hear such things vocalized as, I'm just one person, what can I do? I'm not a minister, what do I know of these things? We see doubt in the church as it grows and expands its knowledge and understanding and recognizes its call to the community around it. There is doubt as the church hears a call to be of service to the marginalized. There is doubt in the church as it tries to answer the call to love all and allow love to rule. We hear doubt in the church as it's called to stand for a just world. We hear doubt in the church as it is called to care for the earth. Many fall into fear and doubt because many of these things go against what they grew up believing even. Many things the church is doing feel strange or out of the norm. This is where we hear doubt raised in the form of regression, or we've always done it that way, or also known as the back to Egypt committee. One can hear fear and doubt when questions are raised if the church had the wrong approach in the past, what makes it correct at this time? It's all okay. We are human. We have doubt. We will always have doubt. And as soon as we have one thought or one idea, our minds tend to go in 100 different directions. And most of those directions lead to some kind of doubt. I would even venture to say that this is common to all of us. And of that, I have no doubt. But doubt can be good. Doubt leads to more questions, and more questions, such as, but why? But how? But if that, then what? Or then what? And I have two favorite answers to doubt. I don't know, and let's find out together. Where is God leading us? I don't know. Let's find out together. Uh-oh, if the pastor doesn't know, doubt and questioning are normal parts of our lives as people of faith. When we acknowledge that reality in our lives and in our teaching, we give permission for exploration and for growth. We become empowered to claim our own journeys, to shape and plan a bright new future for the church, for our community, for the world. So often, the church, we talk about faith, and that it is a powerful thing to talk about. But not to claim the flip side of faith, the perpetual traveling companion of faith, which is doubt, means we're not leaving room for the real life experiences of people. Even the most faithful have moments of doubt. End quote. There is that saying that God never gives us more than we can handle, and I just wish God didn't have that much faith in me. It's a common saying, and yet there is that cry of doubt in there. That doubt in handling things all on our own. Yet, when we look back on such instances in our lives, we realize that we really are never alone on this journey. And so in this passage today, Jesus is telling his detractors exactly what he is, who he is. That he is of God, one with God, and those who have chosen to follow him know this. Jesus says, my disciples know me. He's doing it in the language that he used in the parable of the Good Shepherd. He is saying it in the language and the metaphor of the time. And in spite of the continued questioning, in spite of how frustrating the doubters may be, Jesus answers them. Jesus gives them proof, once again. Knowing this may not change their hearts, but it will change and move the hearts through generations to come. Jesus again uses the imagery of a thief coming to steal the flock, someone trying to lead them astray, coming in to lead them away and lead them towards harm. But he also offers reassurance. He offers reassurance in this passage where he reassures that his flock is protected by one more powerful than the thief. Jesus is basically saying, I know who you guys are, pretending to ask questions of my authority, only in an attempt to build up your own authority. But I and mine stand against your powers, and my sheep are protected by me. We stand against empire. We stand against the authority that is claiming authority just for the sake of authority. No matter what we may go through, no matter what may be thrown at us, we persevere in faith through our doubts and fears. I know some of us have had hard times. I know some of us have been tested by disease and lost loved ones. I know some of us have suffered through addiction and known loss. I know at times some of us may not have felt protected from loved ones who abuse or belittle them. This is how we are called to bring the gospel message of peace and grace. This is the place into which we are called to bring bring the world a word of hope. This is how we are called to help folks hear the voice of the shepherd and to follow it in their lives. You see, in spite of all this pain and anguish, in spite of fear and doubt, we are still here. We're not alone in our pain and anguish, and we move through it with our faith and with our doubts. Walter Brueggemann, speaking of the world, reminds us that there is a considerable anguish among us. The loss produces fear and anxiety, very often anger, sometimes hate and violence. We now live in a society of resentment and alienation in which the greed to get a full share while there are still shares available, and neighbors are seen as rivals and competitors or threats. Or instead of facing the reality of anguish, we divert our energy to the chase for more commodities. You know, he who has the most toys wins. But we are the ones who have been baptized in the gospel, who now participate in the anguish in a different way, in a way that is healing and transformative, generative and hospitable. We as Christians who have been through and lived through fear and doubt and anguish that is filtered through the love of Christ, come a new way of being, new ways of seeing. Instead of refusing the other, gays, immigrants, Muslims, as threats, we take them as neighbors. Instead of greedy economics that serve our privilege, where all the others, especially prisoners and disabled, are treated with dignity. Instead of environmental self-indulgences that pollute and destroys, we are committed to ecological responsibility, to accept discipline, limits, and regulation, even if they inconvenience us, and lead to a revised standard of living. Instead of strident nationalism, we take seriously the community of nations, knowing peace and justice is a shared task that requires participation rather than domination. It is our pain and struggles, our doubts and our fears that have slowly moved the church into these areas. It is through doubts and questions we can learn and grow and continue to discover what it means to be Christian in a world that is always changing and shifting and growing around us. And it seems to be shifting and growing at faster and faster speeds. We can be present to our anguish and our doubts and our fears in generative ways and seek out new God-given ways of living abundantly into our ministries. Today, we can look at the ministries we have and boldly ask, can they be bigger? Can they be reimagined as something brighter, more beautiful, that serves the world around us in exciting new ways? We can ask, what more can we do? Where are we being called to grow? Yes, there will be fear and doubt, anguish and pain, but that's what we are called to. We are called to step boldly into our fears, step boldly into the pain, step boldly into the suffering, because on the other side of it all is a bright Easter morning. And we are an Easter people. We are a resurrected people. So every time that we suffer a little doubt, a little pain, a little anguish, a little fear, we rise again and step boldly in faith to make our world the world that we are called to make it, a world of love and justice for all. Amen. Now please rise and bow to your spirit as you're able to join us in number 240.